Up next on Fantasia the Talkshow, we have Jovanka Vuckovic and Munro Chambers with Riot Girls. Thank you so much for being here. I want to know like your journey because you were the editor of Rue Morgue for a very long time, and then you've been making films now for a few years. Can you kind of talk about that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very lucky to have had a career working in the horror business, you know, as an adult, which is something I, as a lifelong horror fan and a little girl, could like never have imagined. But I noticed something in all the years studying horror films at the magazine, and it was a representation problem that women had in the horror genre. We were misrepresented in front of the camera and seriously underrepresented behind it. And no matter how many people I asked, could you please write women as actual human beings in horror movies? Very few people were doing it. So one day I just decided, you know, to heck with it, I'm going to just do it myself. And I didn't have any film school background, but I was a visual effects artist before I took the job as a magazine editor. So I had it's not like I'd never been on a film set. So I started making short films and learning the craft of directing, and with a goal to redefine women in the genre space. So that's how XX happened. XX arose as you know, in a direct result of the lack of opportunities for women, particularly in the horror genre. All of the women filmmakers I know were being passed over for jobs on all these anthologies that were coming out, and so me and Todd Brown decided to just like make one for the women, where the women could tell their own stories. And it was a huge success. And you know, it topped the iTunes charts, and it premiered at Sundance, and it sort of confirmed what I always knew about the horror genre, and that's that that women are the next great frontier of horror cinema. People want to see new perspectives, and when we put women in the role of like writing and directing their own stories, new storytelling possibilities emerge, and it just refreshes and injects new life into horror cinema. So that's how I ended up directing films. Yeah. And
I mean, I feel the same way. I think that when we talk about inclusivity in the film industry, we're not talking about like this is just a quota system. It's about having these new ideas and these new characters and these new films. I would love to know from like, you have XX, you go into Riot Girls though, and this is the film you're at Fantasia with. Can you talk about like the lead up to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought I was just going to write and direct my own material, and that it would be sort of in the horror space and about adult women with adult women problems, which I don't see a lot of in the horror genre. And just specifically when I say that I make feminist horror films, what I mean by that is not this sort of superficial interpretation where like the woman is a killer or something, you know, really flimsy like that. It's really just about depicting women as actual people in movies. And because of the nature of the film business, and that over the last 100 years, 90% of all films have been made by men, the gaze is predominantly male. So, you know, that's what I'm here to change. And so when Riot Girls came along, I thought, you know, I'm not sure this is for me because it's not a horror film. But then I realized it totally fits my brand, because my brand is, you know, to redefine women in the genre space. And so this is a story that takes, you know, that depicts two queer characters in a movie that we don't often see queer characters in. And that's what I loved about it, is that it's not about them coming out, or it's not a queer film. It's just very matter of fact. It's just two people in a story and no explanations required, right? It's the same way we don't need people to explain why a couple is heterosexual in a movie. We don't need that kind of explanation. We just need more of these kinds of stories, because representation matters. These characters didn't exist when I was a kid. Part of the reason it took me so long to become a director is because there was no examples, very few examples of women, particularly in the horror space, It wasn't until I got older that I found out about, like, I saw Near Dark and saw Catherine Bigelow's name and Antonia Bird and Mary Harron. And I went, oh, shoot. women can direct movies too? Wow, like, it never occurred to me because there was just so little of it. So we need to see ourselves represented on screen and behind the camera as well. If little girls, if they can see it, they can be it, to quote Gina Davis and her initiative. So this stuff is important. It's obviously, as if you can tell, it's really important to me. If I wanted a career directing horror movies that depicted women as stupid and powerless, I would be 10 deep by now. But because I'm very choosy about the kind of stories that I want to tell, and it's important to me that, we create real and lasting change in this business, that's why I end up with choosing stories like Riot Girls over some, run-of-the-mill horror movie.
Yeah, like just like baseline scream queens.
Yeah, because even the final girl is a trope. As grateful as we are for the final girl, and for everything she has done for feminism, it's kind of run its course and it's become a trope now because the final girl is not a real person.
No,
she's a construct. Ideal. Yeah, it's a construct. So that kind of happened by accident. And so it would be really nice if we just saw more of these stories, more movies like Neil Marshall's The Descent in the horror space, where you just take a bunch of people in a movie and make them men, and make them women instead of men, and change nothing else about it. And that's why people champion that film so much, because it's just a bunch of, why not make it a bunch of women spelunkers? Why does it have to be a bunch of male spelunkers? And nobody questioned Neil.
They just accepted it.
Yeah, they just accepted it because the movie works. It works. So.
Yeah. And I mean, Munro, what is it like working with Jovanka and working on these kind of sets, which are maybe different, maybe not? I don't want to make assumptions as well. What is it like working on Riot Girls?
It was fantastic. It was fantastic because the people around us were just great at what they were doing. Everyone had the same vision. Everyone worked really, really hard and collaborated. And it's to your point of what you're saying of, like, you said something in the interview recently that you made a point to make sure that the keys in very, very creative departments were women.
Yeah. And
you made a statement to that. And so when you get asked questions like, is it different because the women are the keys? And it's like, well, no, because they were great at what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because they're just really good at their job. And that was like, is it different that Jovanka was, is it different having a woman director? No, I've worked with women directors my whole career, but she's just really good. I've worked with some male directors who are good and some who are, it's more of a challenge.
Yeah.
But with Jovanka, I found out in the audition process that we spoke the same language when we were working on the floor. And so when we were working and trying to find certain intentions or trying to figure out certain scenes, if they weren't really working or if she wanted something out of me or something in between two characters, the way she communicated in our dialogue together was seamless. And usually it takes a couple days or a week to figure that out. At least that's my experience, because you may say something to the actor and you think it's clear, but the way I perceive it is different. And we just picked it up right away. And that was a true pleasure, because that doesn't happen very often. So after that got finished with at the very beginning, then we got to play. And then we really got to really dive in and create, which would go in the rehearsal process, which we didn't have a lot of, and we got to really dive in because we knew that the communication side was taken care of. So it was a blast.
That's great. I'd like to thank both of you for being on the show, Jovanka and Munro. This has been an absolute pleasure. This is an amazing discussion, and I'm happy we're having it still, but hopefully we're going to be moving past it as well, so that there's more diversity, inclusivity in the industry. Riot Girls is super fun. Fantasia's going to go crazy for it, so it's exciting. That was Fantasia the Talk Show. Be sure to tune in for more. Thank you.